Hello everybody, I'm continuing on my joiner project, and I had mentioned in one of my videos that I was going to make a couple of knurled thumb screws to replace two of the gib bolts so I could lock the tables down. And I figured I'd go ahead and take you on a ride with me if you want to go. This is going to be very long. I'm going to show every step that I'm doing. I'm going to be throwing in some tips here and there on the lathe. I'll be going through a lot of basic lathe operations and things of that nature. So let's get on with it. We're going to make some of these. You can make them for anything you want. This is basically the gib screw right here. It's got a conical point on it, which is flat, and it has a 1/4 by 28 thread, which is what we're going to reproduce. I don't know how well this is going to show up, but this is my high-tech drawing of what we're going to try to accomplish here. The knurled portion is going to be about 3/8 of an inch wide. It's going to be 3/4 in its OD. It'll have an overall length of 1 1/8. The section that is threaded will be about 3/4 of an inch. Of course, it'll be a 1/4 inch in diameter right here, and then I'll have about 1/8 inch of a 30-degree angle that comes up to kind of a 3/32 flat. That's what we're trying to mimic. Now, this doesn't have to be spot on. This is not precision work here. A lot of this is just going to be done with rules, but I will be doing some caliper work and things of that nature, so let's get moving. I'm starting off by cutting a 5-inch length of 3/4 12L14. That's going to give me plenty of room to make them as well as hold it securely in the chuck. So here we go. Step 1 complete. Alright, well, I'm trying to give you a bird's eye view here. This is the closest I can get. I was trying to show my dials and everything, but that's just not going to work out, so I'm going to have to just explain some things, and I'll try to be proficient with that. So I've got the piece in here. I'm going to leave out enough. I know it's going to be about 2 1/8 in length, so there's 2 1/8, but I need room to work back here for my tooling, so I'm going to put that up to about 2 1/2, somewhere around in there. And I'm going to come in with my chuck key and tighten this up. Quick note about chuck keys, it never leaves your hand when you're doing this. It's glued to it. Don't ever forget and leave your chuck key in here and accidentally turn the lathe on. If you're lucky, it will hang up and you'll hopefully get it out. If you're unlucky, this thing will sling out and maybe knock your teeth out. So very important. Okay. I left the factory edge out here, the saw rough marks, kind of give a better idea on how to clean something up that wasn't as nicely cut as what I did on the bandsaw. So I'm just coming in here. I'm going to try to keep my head out of the way. And of course, wear safety glasses. I've got mine on, and I need a new pair. They're really scratched up, so I may be taking them off here and there to so I can see. Alright, I don't know if this cutter's centered or not, but we're going to go at it. I'm going to lock the carriage. I'm bringing it right up to the work, and I'm using the cross slide and backing up just a little bit, locking my carriage down. And then I'll turn it on here and see what we get. It's going to come in until I hit it, roll to the center, and go ahead and come out. In here, where I can see, it's not a consistent surface. Getting close. Take a little bit more. Okay, I've got a good facing right there. I'm holding my dial and I'm kind of doing this overhand technique. You could do the spin thing if you like, but I kind of like this. You get good control and you can roll it out real nice. If you have a tit that hangs off in the middle, your cutter is either high or low, more than likely low. If it's high, it'll be kind of shaped like a cone. If it's low, it'll be shaped like this. It'll be straight or coned. That'll kind of give you an idea on what it is if you can see it. Alright, so now the next thing I need to do, unlock the carriage. Need to reposition my cutter just a little bit. Get that out of the way. Alright. I'll try to explain what I'm doing here in just a minute. Well, this part doesn't even matter. We'll get to this momentarily. What I need to do now is just take a truing cut, and instead of touching off and then rolling out and zeroing your dial, there's no point in zeroing your dial until you have a concentric surface. So I'll explain what I'm going to do here. I'm going to come in and touch off, marking that reference point. I'll wheel out like this, and instead of taking my dial to 0, I'll take it 2 or 3 before 0, 2 or 3 thousandths, and then I'll lock it in, and then I'll turn the dial to 0 and take my first cut, and that'll be my true 0. It's just a little quick tip there that saves some time rather than trying to reset your zeros. So I'm going to touch off and do that very thing. Yeah, I've just touched off. Like I said, I'm giving myself 2 or 3 thousandths before 0, and then I'm turning my dial to 0, and I will make my first cleanup pass. I need to turn my power feed on. Here we go. There's a good example. Did you hear that chattering going on? I'm scraping back here. I have too large of an angle. So let me do it this way and see if that helps it out. You have to listen to and feel for your machines, and they'll tell you what's going on. So that's really my new 0. So I'm going to do the same thing and then start this up again. Now you can hear it's not chattering or squealing anymore. It's sounding pretty good. And I'm just going to shut it off right there. And we're going to take a measurement here, because I need to find out the diameter that I want to knurl to. So clean off your blades. Let's see, I'll zero this now, double check it. Now I'm on 0. I'm just going to come in here and take a quick measurement. It's 741 thousandths. So I'm going to hit 7276 is what I want. So 727 or 728. This is the first trick. There's my 728. I'm going to zero it right there. Now I'll take that measurement again, and it's going to tell me exactly how much I need to take off this diameter, which looks like 13 13.5 thousandths, so we'll call it 13 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and take that 13 thousandths since I'm already setting at 0. So I'll turn my dial to 13. Now keep in mind I have direct reading dials here. So I turn mine to 13 and it's going to take that off its total diameter. If you have standard dials that graduate to 100, whatever you're trying to remove, you'll divide that by 2 because you're only going to travel in so much. So you want to cut that measurement in half. I hope that makes sense. So when I talk about my dials, it's and what I'm setting them at, it's going to depend on where you're at. So I'm going to go ahead and run a little bit up to here again and just double check to see where we're at. So now I'll come in here with these again, and it's going to tell me it should hit 0 when we hit the mark we're trying to get to. And I'm at a 1/2 thousandth, so that's close enough for me. What I'm doing here is determining the correct diameter to knurl with, and this is all covered in a series I have up on that. So I'm going to run this out to about here, and I'm going to do the knurling in this area. We don't have to knurl the whole thing. So I'm just going to start it up where it sits. Here we go. And I'm going to run this out to about 2 1/4. I'm not taking it out that far. Taking it out to about 1 1/2. Now just shut it off right there. So that's about 1 1/2 inches right there. I was thinking twice our length. The total length of this is, I guess, 1 1/8. I was thinking 2 1/8. So that's going to leave me enough room here to knurl this section out here, because we're going to cut this away anyway. So now we're ready to do the knurling. And like I said, this is outlined in greater detail on a series that I have up. So I'm going to try to run through this part really quick, or all of it for that matter. I'm just using the end of my work to set this. Tighten it up. All right. Like I said, I'm just doing the section out at the end. That's all we really care about. Go ahead and give this a little tightening here. Looks pretty good already. Give it just a little bit more. Put my lathe in back gear here. Put some cutting oil on it. And here we go. Looking good. Give it a little more here. About there already. Give it just a tiny bit more. Finish this off. Okay, that's perfect. Perfect as perfect can get. And you probably can't see on the camera, but they look great. They feel great. I'm going to do my typical knocking the points off. Alright, so I'm going to knock the points off. That's just my preference. That's all there was to that. Just softens it up just a little bit. Okay, well, I made a design change. Instead of just putting a fillet down here, this was going to be really weak with this 3/4 diameter. So I'm actually going to turn a secondary shoulder in here. Hopefully you can see that. So that's really what we need to do right now, is set up for that operation, because we're going to turn that down to 3/8 first, the whole thing. And then we'll reset, and then we'll turn the remaining portion out here down to 1/4. And that shoulder is going to be an 1/8 inch tall or wide. So the first thing to do is we need to mark off where our 3/4 length is going to be right here to determine that. And I'm going to try to show you a couple of ways, and the way I'm going to do it, to determine from this point to this point without too much effort. Now, one way you could do it, like I said, we're doing coarse measurements here. You could take a rule, put some die chem on, mark it off that way, or with a caliper. You could actually turn it on, set your caliper, and scribe a line around here. We don't have that luxury with this. So what I'm going to do is pick my cutter, load it up, kind of start moving things up in here. So I'm going to check two things here, because I want to do all this in one operation. I want to turn down and shoulder out without changing anything. So I'm just kind of wiggling this around, touching the surface. And you can't see this, but the cutter edge is tilted back this way. So when I'm coming across here, I have relief behind it. So I've got some relief there. I'm going to come out to the edge and see if I'm going to be able to shoulder that up. And I think I need to turn it just a little bit more. Okay, so now I have clearance behind this cutter edge here, from here to the point, as well as clearance from this point backwards. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to set the cutter in just to the edge to where it touches. That's it. Okay? Now you could back it right out at that point and measure down the work to the edge of the cutter, but I'm going to use a stop. And I have a micrometer stop here, or a carriage lock. So this is going to stop right here whenever we contact that. Now I know I want 3/4 of an inch of travel here. So what I'm going to do is take two gauge blocks to set this up. And I'm going to go ahead and make it proud just so we can see. I hope you can see my micrometer stop down here. So I'm just tightening up onto my way. Okay, so there's the end. We want to be able to move this carriage exactly 3/4 of an inch. Here's two round gauge blocks. This is a 600 and a 150. That'll make our 3/4. I'm going to ring them together, and they've got such a nice polish on them, they'll actually stick together. I'm just holding it down in here, and I'm going to turn this until I contact my carriage. Right there. And now I'll lock the quill on my stop and take those gauge blocks out. So now I know right there it's 3/4 inches in. And I could have done a little bit more knurling here. I'm going to make that work because I'm going to chamfer that edge anyway. So now I know that portion. Okay, so that's as far as we're going to go right there. Now I need to start reducing this diameter down to 3/8 of an inch, which is what we wanted. So just like the other one, I will dial this in to 375 thousandths. There's 375 thousandths. I'll zero my dial. Now I'll just keep taking material away until this reads 0. So just by checking it right where it sits on diameter, it looks like I need to take off about 353 thousandths of an inch. So that's quite a ways. I'll do the same thing here. I've got my dial loose. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to come in and touch off. And I've just touched off. And just like the last one, rather than just setting my dial to 0 here, which would work since this is already concentric, I know I'm turning it down, and sometimes it's hard to exactly find the 0. So I'm going to do the same thing, giving myself 2 or 3 thousandths before 0, locking it, and then turning it up to 0. Now I know we're going to hog a lot off here, and I'm going to try to talk over the lathe. I'm going to do this manually feeding rather than try to do power feeds. I'll power feed the last bit. So to start with, I'm going to take 100 thousandths off its diameter, so that's 100 on my dial, so I'm really taking a 50 thousandths cut. You would be dialing yours to 50,000 if your lathe could handle it. So here we go. Go ahead and put a little cutting oil on here. So I'm just giving it a nice steady feed. Everything's sounding good, feeling good. I'm just going to come up and touch this stop right here, and that will tell me I've gone 3/4 of an inch down the work. I can hear my belt slipping just a little bit. Okay, and I'll go ahead and take another 100. hit my stop. So I'm just going to come in here and do a slow pass, not complete, just cleaning up the end a little bit, and then I'll turn it off and I'll just take a measurement right here and just see about how far we need to go. We certainly don't want to overshoot the mark. So it's still set up for 375 thousandths or 3/8 of an inch, and it looks like I need to do 162 thousandths still yet. So I'll do another 100 thousandths. And we'll just work our way down to that target. And I know that was 162, I believe. So I'm going to take 50 thousandths right now. And then we'll double check it and see where we're at. I didn't write anything down. Now I'm just going to clean up the end by hand real quick. Just slowing my feed rate down. Wipe off the work. Wipe off my jaws. And then we'll see where we're at. Yeah, it looks like I need to take off 12 thousandths. So I'm going to take off 10 and then check it and see how close we are. There's 10 thousandths. Check it again. It's really long here, but like I said, it's going to take you on the journey if you wanted to see everything. Yeah, looks like I need to take off 2 thousandths, so I'm pretty much on the nose here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn the power feed on for this pass, just so I can explain another technique here. When you're using a hard stop like this, a carriage stop, you never let it run into it, obviously, or you'll just destroy things. So you always stop shy. Right before this contacts that, turn off your power feed and feed the last little bit by hand. So I'll do that very thing. And then once I get to the hard stop by hand, I'll simply turn my cross feed and I'll move the cutter out and it'll clean up this face right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little oil on it. And here we go. You know what? I only care about this last section down in here, that 1/8 inch. So I'll just go a little quick right through here. And then turn on the power feed for that final pass. It'll save a little bit of time. So I'm watching the gap right here, waiting for it to close up, and it's getting ready to. I'm turning it off, and now I'm feeding the last little bit by hand. I've hit the stop. I'm going to lock my carriage, and then I'm going to turn this out right here. Alright, so that's cleaned up that face. We've turned that section down to 3/8. Now we're going to work on the next section. We know we want to turn it down to 1/4 inch, and we want an 1/8 inch ledge or shoulder left on this 3/8 right here. So we need to set the depth for it. What would be the easiest way? We could measure that again and do the other things. There is a micrometer dial on this, but I don't necessarily trust it. So what I'm going to do is take an 1/8 inch gauge block. I'm just going to move my carriage over and sandwich it in here. Hopefully you can see that right there. There's my block. So I've just moved the carriage or the cutter that way 1/8 of an inch. Now I'll loosen this, take the block out, and I'll tighten this until it just contacts that apron, and then I'll lock it in. So now I've effectively set my 1/8 inch that quick. The gauge blocks and these micrometer stops, they're wonderful things to have. I've made another attachment for a dial indicator that I could use down here as well. So once again, we'll come in, we're going to touch off and do the same thing. So we wanted 1/4 inch on this diameter. So I'll close my calipers out, I'll set them back to 0. I'm on 0, and I'll go out 250 thousandths. So there's 250 thousandths. That's my 1/4 inch. Now I'll 0 them, and we'll do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead, since I'm taking this off, I'm just going to go ahead and set a new 0, since I didn't really know where I was at, right? So I'll do the same thing. I'll loosen my dial, start up the machine, coming in and touching off. There's my touch off. Turn this power feed off so it's not quite as loud. I'm rolling about 2 or 3 thousandths before 0. Locking my dial, turning it up to 0. And now we can start doing the work. So I already know I want to do that quite a bit, so I'm going to take off 50 thousandths just as a preliminary pass. And when the stock starts getting thinner in diameter like this, I'll lighten up my passes, which is why I kind of cut it in half. So I'm coming up to my stop block here, my carriage block. There it is. There's my 1/8 inch. And let's just take a quick peek at that. Looking pretty good. So I'm going to do a light cleaning here. Let's see where I'm at. I need to take off, looks like 74 thousandths. And another thing that you could do here if you wanted to, just an idea. I'm going to loosen up my 0, my dial, and I'm going to turn it to 74 thousandths before 0. And that's another way you can do things with the dials. Now I kind of have a reference point. When I get close to 0, I'll stop and check and make sure I'm on the money. I'm just trying to throw in as many ideas here as possible. So we'll continue on. So like I said, I'm 75 thousandths before 0. If you had direct reading dials, or if you had standard dials, you would cut that number in half. Keep that in mind. So I'll just go up a little ways. I can take a little bit bigger of a cut than that. Like I said, the thinner it gets, the slower I'll take cuts. Or the lighter cuts. So I'm just creeping up on the block. There it is. I'm getting pretty close. I'm going to stop 10 thousandths shy of my 0. Do a little test on it. I'll go back to my calipers and see where I'm at here. Yeah, it looks like I'm at 9.5 thousandths and I have 10 left on my dial. So I'm in the ballpark right there. I'm going to go ahead and put it at 9 or 1 before 0 and do a small test here and try to hit that mark. That's what we're shooting for. See where I'm at. See, that's money right there, and that's why I stopped 1,000 shy. These graduations on these 200 direct reading dials, they are really close together. So a little bit here and a little bit there, and you're going to run into a problem. I'm going to run a finishing pass on this same deal. I'll let it run until it gets close to the stop. I'll shut it off. I'll do the last part by hand, and then I'll draw out to clean that face. Watching my gap here. I'm hoping this dial shows up to stop. I'm getting pretty close. I'm going to turn it off, feed the last little bit by hand until I hit that stop. I've hit the stop, locking my carriage, or you can just hold the handle, either way. Turning that face out. And there you go. You know, if you guys are like doing this stuff and you're fairly new to, you know, lathe work and stuff like that, take small light cuts, go slow. It doesn't matter how much time you take, and just kind of learn the process. And speed comes later. You know, don't worry about all how quick you can remove material and how big of cuts you can take on your lathes and all that jazz. Just do something like this and enjoy it, but be safe, of course. All right, well, it's looking like something, is it not? We're almost ready to put some threads on it. But what I want to do first is try to work out this chamfer on the end, and then I want to chamfer right here. If you have a threading tool, let's just use that. That's 30 degrees, right? So I'm just holding it up to the work and just moving things around. I'm trying to do this. Sorry about the camera there. I really need to stick my head over here, but I'm not going to. This will be close enough for anything I need to do. And there we go. A little easier. If you guys are buying threading tools, by the way, get a good one. Don't buy the imported stuff on these. The graduations on them are just nasty. I just seen pictures of them. This is a Starrett. You can pick these up off eBay, buy them new. They're not all that much money, but these things are the best ones you can get. Or a Brown and Sharp, or even a Lufkin. I need to move my stop out of the way, micrometer stop. Alright, well the first thing I'm going to do is come in here and just give that a little chamfer. One thing you should probably entertain doing when you start getting close to the chuck like this is spinning around by hand and kind of get a feel for the area you're going to be working in before you accidentally run into something or turn it on and have something in the way. So I've just locked my carriage down. I'm just going to fire it up and plunge in a little bit by hand. Turn this off. That's all I'm going to do. Now I'm going to move out to this end. The only thing I'm really going to look for here is a 3/16 flat on the end. Everything else should kind of take care of itself. And these, when you're cutting a surface this wide, they'll usually chatter, grind, howl. Turn that off and see where I'm at. Looks good enough to me. I was going to just double check it with my gib screw, but I can't seem to locate it. Alright, well I found my screw. Okay. I need to take a little bit more off that. Pretty good to me. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is soften this point right here. So I'm just going to come in with a file and just kind of round that over to make it more like a cone. Okay, that looks good. Now we're getting ready to put some threads on it. So it's going to be a 1/4 20, and we're just going to take it all the way down to the shoulder that we left on there. And this is not really the best type of holder for this because it has this mechanism on the back and it's not flat. I need to get one that's flat on both sides, and I'll show you why. I could put this block on my tool post and wheel this up here and use that as the flat surface to start my threads. But I don't really have the luxury on this one this way. So I'm going to do it a different way, which is going to work, but not really what I would want to do. I'm going to use this section to my benefit, and I'm going to use my live center in the tailstock, and that's going to allow me to at least get this thing started straight. So I need to get my chuck out of here. Always clean out your tapers before you put things together. There we go. And this is going to get a little bit tight. I'm going to get as close as I can with this. Something about like that. Lock my tailstock down. And then I'm going to bring in the quill of my tailstock to hold this. Some thread cutting oil. And I'm going to turn this, and it's going to sit right here. And I'm turning the tailstock as I run this by hand to start those threads. And once I get them started good enough, I can remove the tailstock and everything and then finish them off by hand. So that's all I needed to do right there. So I'll back it up just a little bit to break those, and now we're threading. And you can do power on this if you want to, slow speed, and just kind of hold things, or bring your carriage up and let it sit here as a block support. But we'll just do it this way. So I just go on a little bit, then back it up to break the chips. Coming back up. I could have single point threaded these as well, but if I have a die, it's just easier and faster. We're getting close. Then we just got a couple more things to do and this will be finished. I'm just bringing it up to where it just kisses that shoulder we left there, that 3/8 shoulder. And that's it. So we've just put those threads on there. I'm going to take my file and smooth off the end threads, and I'll go ahead and touch this just a little bit as well. Alright, well that looks good. Looking good. Now we're going to part it off, and this is a procedure that a lot of people have problems with on the lathe. First and foremost, you only want as much cutter hanging out here as it takes to get to the center of your part. Secondly, it needs to be perpendicular to the part when you're doing it, when you are parting. So what I'm going to do here is use the side of my chuck as a guide, and I'm setting the edge of the blade on it and just getting it perfect lined up with that. So now I know that the actual blade itself is perpendicular to the chuck and the work. And on this we wanted 3/8 of an inch from here to here. So I'll bring in another nifty little tool. This is just a depth gauge. I'll set this at 3/8 of an inch. Right there. And I can use this to set my blade. And you have to keep in mind which side we're doing too. I'm just bringing the blade up close, bringing this in here and holding it, and just bringing it right up to the edge of that blade. Just like that. That'll give me my 3/8 of an inch. Now I'll lock my carriage. And you always lock your carriage when you're parting off. I don't think the little Harbor Freight lathes, maybe some of you guys can answer that, but I don't think they come with a carriage lock. And if they don't, I believe there's a modification. You need to modify one. Secondly, you want this thing on center or just a little bit above it. I'm going to part this off in back gear. Alright, the biggest trick to this is the proper feed rate. The faster this is turning, the faster you have to feed. Just trust me on that. So I'm going to turn really slow so I can feed in a little slow. And this is a tactile feel. You'll get it. Play around with it, but you can get it. And of course you want to keep fluid in it. So I'm getting ready to part this off. So making sure everything's looking good. Okay, here we go. Cutter fluid. It's going to be loud at first because I have to get through the knurling. So you can see I'm feeding at a pretty nice feed rate. It's curling the chip out of there. And there we go. Now the last thing we need to do is turn this around and dress the other side. And of course we don't want to put, that's kind of warm, and of course we don't want to put threads in there without wrapping something around them. Perhaps a aluminum or some brass shim stock, something along those lines. But let's try something else here, just for grins. Just an idea that, look at that, look at that. What did I tell you guys? I just did that. Shame on me. Do as I say, not as I do. Alright. I'm going to try something here. And this should work just fine for what I want to do. I'm going to use the die as a tool holder. Because we're going to be taking really light passes and working on this end. Keep that in your hand. Just going to set the die in there. Just enough to hold it. Just spin it up, see what it looks like. It's wiggling around a little bit. Let's see if I can. Actually, this face looks pretty good. So we're going to go with it. So I'm going to come in here and face this off. Okay, there's a little nub left on it. If they're too much of a problem, you could take a saw and whack them off, or I just kind of come in here with my blade and work at it lightly. Need to get out of the back gear. Okay, let me work this. Just lightly turning it down. Lock my carriage. That's cleaned up nice. Last thing, I'm going to be working close to the chuck with this, so you have to be very careful where you put things. So here we go. And there we have it. Clean it up and I'll give you a close-up shot of it, and then I'll make the second. Here's a quick shot of where it's going to live. Right here in this center hole. And it locks in there, tightens up just like it's supposed to. I'm going to make one more just like it. Put on the other side. Well, here's the finished product and the second one. I went ahead and made the second one just so I could kind of get an idea on how long it kind of took me, because it takes a long time to shoot the videos and move the camera and think about what I'm doing and explain things. And it took me about 20 minutes to make one of these, and I really wasn't even trying. I was just going through the motions. But hopefully you can see the facing turned out quite nice on both of them. The knurling turned out beautifully. I knocked the tops of the knurls off, which is why you're seeing a little reflection there. Of course, there's the shoulder, the threads, the cones, you know, everything we outlined to make these two. And, you know, it's fairly simple to do. I just thought this was a good opportunity to maybe shoot a video more so in real time and show a bunch of different lathe operations, because there were so many in this. It's a neat little project for people to learn on and play with. And, you know, just take your time. You know, speed is irrelevant to me. You know, I enjoy the process of doing these things. I'm not working a production shop. I come up with a little something and I make it. And half of the fun is the journey. You know, I could have went out and purchased something like this, I'm sure, for, you know, a few bucks a piece, but You get some scrap laying around, you got the machine tools. There's nothing like making them on your own. So I hope this video helps, you know, at least show a couple things here and there. I've been meaning to do a lot of lathe type stuff, basic stuff, but I just hadn't found the time yet. You know, I've got other projects going on. So this was part of the lathe, so it was a natural extension. I'm sorry, this was part of the joiner project, so it was a natural extension since I was going to do that modification as well. So I hope this helps you guys out in some way. Thanks for watching, and good luck.